Statement 1 says, man has used poisons for assassination purposes ever since the dawn of civilization, against individual enemies, but also occasionally against armies. 2 states, these dangers were soon recognized and resulted in two international declarations in 1874 in Brussels, and in 1899 in The Hague, the prohibited that prohibited the use of poison weapons. 3 states, the foundation of microbiology by Louis Pasteur and Robert Koch, offered new prospects for those interested in biological weapons because it allowed agents to be chosen and designed on a rational basis. And then 4 states, though treaties were all made in good faith, they contain no means of control and so fail to prevent interested parties from developing and using biological weapons. So, first off, we see that statement 1 introduces not only poisons or man's use of poisons for purposes, etc., since the dawn of civilization. It all qualifies to show that this is an introductory statement. It might just be the first statement in our sequence. Also, this introduces use of poisons against individual enemies, but also occasionally against armies. So the aspect of the idea of weapons that we have in the other 3 statements is introduced here. So it seems like one would be our opening statement. Next up, we do have a pair forming in 2 and 4. If you look at 2, we find these dangers. Now, we don't know what these dangers is referring to. It might connect to 1 or it might connect to 3, but these dangers were soon recognized and resulted in two international declarations, 1874 in Brussels and 1899 in The Hague, that prohibited the use of poison weapons. This is the key aspect. Prohibited the use of poison weapons. And then 4 says, though treaties were all made in good faith, they contain no means of control. So treaties might be referring to these, the 1874 Brussels, 1899 Hague. It might be referring to these. But we don't need that to connect these two statements. Contain no means of control and so fail to prevent interested parties from developing and using biological weapons. We are talking about prohibition, the aspect that we see here. Prohibition introduced in 2, and that is followed through, as in this idea of prohibition, it did not work out, it was not fruitful. They failed to implement prohibition or prevent interested parties from developing and using biological weapons. So we see that these two statements should be, at least in that sequence, we have 2, then we have 4. We might have a statement in between them. So we put in 2, and then we put in 4. Yet again, we can do this sequence exactly because one is introductory of poisons, one is introductory of biological weapons or poison weapons, as we see in 2. So 1 definitely precedes 2 and 4. 2 definitely precedes 4. Now we just have to analyze for 3. 3, unfortunately, is a bit of a floater because it does not seem to directly connect with too much. So we'll see in order of priority where it fits. 3 states, The Foundation of Microbiology by Louis Pasteur and Robert Koch, offered new prospects for those interested in biological weapons because it allowed agents to be chosen and designed on a rational basis. Now, we often misunderstand the word agent. There are many meanings of the word agent. The one that we often think of is either the sales agent or the secret service agent. But here, when we say agent, we are talking about poisons. The poisonous agent and the foundation of microbiology by Louis Pasteur and Robert Koch would be the one that allowed agents to be chosen or poisons to be chosen and designed on rational basis. This here is what finally connects with these dangers were soon recognized. So once we understand the word agent, agreed, the assessment of these lines or the sequence that we're looking for, it does turn on our understanding of the word agent. But if we do, then the passage makes complete and clear sense. So we realize by that also, now let's assume that we didn't understand what agent here means, but allowed agents to be chosen and designed on a rational basis, offered new prospects for those interested in biological weapons. And we have those interested in prevented interested parties also in 4. And we do have the use of poison weapons in 2. So we realize that 3 must at least precede 4. 3 cannot come before 1. So we now have 2 positions where statement 3 could be in. Either 3 falls between 1 and 2, or 3 falls between 2 and 4. Once we are at this point, we can check the connections between 132 and 234. We realize that 132 works. Man has used poisons for assassination purposes ever since the dawn of civilization. No problems there. Against individual enemies, but also occasionally against armies. The Foundation of Microbiology by Louis Pasteur and Robert Koch offered new prospects for those interested in biological weapons because it allowed agents to be chosen. These dangers were soon recognized and resulted in 2 international declarations, though treaties were all made in good faith. So 1324 is perfect. There's absolutely no problem with using or placing 3 in between 1 and 2. If we try the other alternative, if we try 1234, we find that doesn't make all that kind of sense. So man has always used poisons against individual enemies, but also occasionally against armies. These dangers were soon recognized. Dangers because of the use of poisons, all right, that may be okay. We might have that, and resulted in 2 international declarations and so on in The Hague, in Brussels and in The Hague, that prohibited the use of poison weapons. The Foundation of Microbiology by Louis Pasteur and Robert Koch offered new prospects for those interested in the weapons, in biological weapons, because it allowed agents to be chosen and designed on a rational basis. Though treaties were all made in good faith, they contained no means of control and so failed to prevent interested parties from developing and using biological weapons. Here we have the issue. We have a better fit in 132, rather in 234. The 3-4 becomes a little sketchy because in 3 we introduce agents to be chosen and designed on rational basis, and in 4 we say so fail to prevent interested parties from developing and using biological weapons. So this kind of seems abrupt because we have the dangers here established before these statements. So we realize that 2 actually works as a perfect gelling statement between 3, which introduces the people or parties interested in biological weapons, and 4, where these people are further mentioned. So treaties fail to mention, fail to prevent other these interested parties from using biological weapons. Now, despite all that, we can further simplify. That gives us a sense that this sequence, the placing of 3 here, is incorrect. So we can get one more idea. We can final confirm by seeing that 4 actually is, in a way, a change of argument, because we are talking about the use of uh, development and use of biological weapons, while earlier it is about these weapons, but not necessarily about the use. We see the aspect of use in 2, which places 2 and 4 together. 3, which talks about the dangers, the foundation of microbiology, new prospects, and allowed agents to be chosen and designed, that seems like a precursor to these two statements, which kind of builds the premise for these two statements. So, by comparison, if we went into comparison earlier, it might have been confusing. This is a difficult question, not so much tough as confusing. But then the sequence becomes clear by this time. If we use comparison now, then it should help us clarify our idea, gain some clarity into the sequence. So we realize that our sequence is thus: 1 comes in as the first statement, then we have 3 as the second statement, then comes 2 as the third statement, and finally we have 4 coming in as the fourth statement. So we get the final sequence as 1, 3, 2, 4.